Market Failure and Public Goods, by the fourth discussion leaders. Good day. Here are the lesson objectives.
In economics, the term divergence simply means the gaps or the difference between the two things that ideally should be aligned. Arthur Pigo, as one of the founder of the modern welfare economics, used this idea to identify why does the market sometimes fail to produce the best outcome for the society. So Pigo focuses on the divergence between the marginal private cost of benefits. This means that the benefits of the individual while the other one is the marginal social cost or benefits that solely focus on the impact on society or the benefits of the society. When the private and the social don't match, it naturally cannot give or produce the best outcome for the society, or it cannot give the best efficient for the society. When these two differ, the market cannot maximize a national dividend, meaning the overall social welfare. So to provide a solution to this problem, Pego suggested that there should be a public intervention, or what he calls the Pegovian taxes. That these Pegovian taxes can correct this divergence. These taxes are based on the principle that the one who causes harm should pay. So Pigo assumes that the government are capable of knowing all the private damages and preferences on assumption that the state are all omniscient and benevolent. In short, the divergence is one of the reasons why does the market fail, that um, private decision doesn't always lead to the best outcome. Well, recognizing these gaps will certainly give the government this is reason or giving reasons to the government to why they should intervene in the market failure.
Good day, everyone. I'm going to discuss about externalities as a cause of market failure. So in this sense, we define externalities as unintended side effect, either harmful or beneficial, that caused by economic activities that affect third parties who do not directly involve in the transaction. Because market only consider private costs, benefits and gains rather than social benefits and gains. So first externalities we're going to discuss about is the negative externalities. Negative externalities occurs when production or consumption of goods imposes costs to others who do not uh, receive compensation. So these external costs are not reflected in market prices, resulting in overproduction of harmful goods or activities. So example of these are air pollution, traffic congestion, plastic waste, and etc. And the next externalities we're going to discuss about is the positive externalities. So positive externalities occurs when there's an individuals or firms that provide benefits to others without receiving any payment or compensation. So in this case, the market tends to underproduce the uh, goods and services because the private gains in is lower than the social gains or benefits in the market. So one of the example of these are like the education, vaccination programs, public parks and spaces, research and innovations, and etc. So next is market power concentration. This is considered as one of the major causes of market failure. This is common in situations where there is a little competition, like in monopolies, oligopolies, and cartels. And firms who have significant market power may limit the output and set prices above marginal cost. That's why consumers often faces higher costs with limited options, and the resources aren't fully used to its full potential. So um, long-term productivity and growth and innovations are also limited due to lack of competitions. So in order to stop monopolistic practices and promote market efficiency, the government frequently employ antitrust laws and competition policies and regulatory bodies.
One of the reasons why does the market fails because of information asymmetry. Information asymmetry causes market failure because for the market to work efficiently, it needs both parties to have information or the buyer and the seller have equal access to information. If one party have information and the other one lacks information, the decision rather, could lead to distorted incentive change and the market cannot allocate resources efficiently. This mismatch could lead to imbalanced decision making, where the markets rely on information if the other party lacks information, this could lead to market failure. So for example, farmers plant crops without knowing the demand, which could lead to oversupply or shortage. This information asymmetry could also lead to adverse selection where when buyers don't know about whether it's good or bad, they could lower their prices. This could also lead to moral hazard, where hiding the information could lead to or engage to political or price manipulation. And in conclusion, information asymmetry causes failure because unequal decision access to information leads to poor decision, distorted incentives, and inefficient outcomes. The other reason of what causes the market failure when the public good is non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So a good is non-rivalrous when other person is using it, it does not reduce the availability for others. For example, national defense, street lights, park, or public fireworks, where they can benefit without diminishing the enjoyment of others. A good is excludable when it's either impossible or very costly to prevent others from using it. That this characteristic could lead to severe problems for private provision because people cannot be easily excluded. Some individuals chooses to pay ride where they can get benefits without paying it. So public good causes market failure because the non-rivaling and non-exclusively encourage free riding which leads individuals to rely on others without paying. As a result, market cannot collect enough contribution to production costs, causing this good to be unprovided or not provided at all, since everyone benefits but few are willing to pay. The market fails to achieve the social efficient level of output, making government intervention necessary to ensure adequate provision.
Good day, everyone. Now we are going to discuss the different type of economic growth. But first, let us define what is economic growth. Ludwig Mises in 1949 described economic goods in which themselves are fitted to satisfy human wants directly and whose serviceableness does not depend on the cooperation of other economic goods, and are called consumers' goods or goods of the first order. In the presentation, I have highlighted different types or examples of economic goods. We have first the groceries, the factories, the services, as well as gadgets and the basic necessities such as clothes and crops. All of these examples are types of economic goods or examples of economic goods. Now, we are going to discuss the next topic, which is about the tabular presentation of the different types of economic goods. Now, I have used the reference of Economics in 2024, which they have a tabular presentation that differentiate the characteristics of private goods, public goods, common resources, and club goods. And it is according to excludability and rivalry. So first and foremost, private goods are both excludable and rival. However, club goods are non-rival but excludable. On the other hand, public goods are both non-excludable and non-rival. But common resources or common pool resources are both rival but non-excludable. So from this differentiation, we can draw the differences of the four types of economic goods, from private goods to public goods to common resources and club goods. And from that, we can see what are the connections of each of goods to its characteristics, whether it may be non-excludable or non-rival. The first two parts of our discussion, or the two types of economic goods, are public goods and common whole goods. Now, Lumen in 2018 described the characteristics of public goods as non-excludable and a non-rival goods. Although it is non-excludable, meaning we can prevent people from using or consuming this type of goods, it creates a free riding problem, which is a very prevalent and very timely problem in the Philippines, wherein we have different type of goods, and those free riders benefit from those goods without directly contributing to those types of goods. Like, they do not pay taxes, they don't vote, or they don't participate in any political matters in the Philippines, but they benefit from the goods. And this type is a public goods. And then we have the non-rival goods, meaning one person's consumption of the goods does not necessarily exacerbate the usage of other people from using those type of goods, which is described as a public goods. So what are the examples of public goods? We have the national security or national defense. We have also media, and we have bridges or facilities. These types of goods cannot be rivaled, and we cannot exclude people from getting the same national security, national defense, or from just walking down the bridge that is publicly owned by the government, and as well as the media. We cannot control the consumption of people of the different types of media. So they have the freedom to access it everywhere and anytime. Now, the second type of public goods is the common whole goods. Now, CFI team on 2023 explains that common pool resources are both non-excludable and it poses a management challenges. Now, although it is non-excludable, meaning we can't prevent people from using it, it risks of over-exploitation. Meaning, one person consumption of a certain good from a common pool goods can reduce the same quality of the other people who will get the same good after that person got the goods or the product. And it also risks of over-exploitation because we cannot assume that all the people will equally divide or will equally get what they want from that type of goods. And then it is also rival rules, meaning we are competing to that type of good from the type of good, but we can also manage those type of challenges in the issue of rivalry. The government can intervene in this type of problem, and they can provide market mechanism that can at least reduce the challenges that people faces when it comes to overexploitation, especially on the common or pool goods. So the different types of common pool goods are the forest, agriculture, fisheries, and many types of goods that includes ownership specifically in nature. Now we are down to the last two types of economic goods, which are private goods and club goods. Now, according to Amarasuriya on 2022, the characteristics of private goods are both excludable and rival use. Meaning, private goods are privately owned by all of the people, and our consumption might deplete the consumption of others, as since we are privately owning those types of products, we have the ability to maximize our purchases in these types of private goods. However, even if it's rival brews, it also produces positive and negative externalities. Those positive and negative externalities are like education. Even if it is sometimes private, in a sense, in economically speaking, we gain from get going to school and learning about specific topics that we are tackling in school or the teacher is discussing. So these types are positive externalities of private goods. Now, the negative externalities, on the other hand, are the ways that the factories have, plastics, sometimes our overconsumption of private goods or products leads to pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and even noise pollution. So, private goods examples are clothing, salon, houses, and many other things or products that we can buy. So, let us distinct that public goods are those type of goods that we do not buy. However, private goods are those types of products or goods that we buy. Now, for the last type of economic goods, we have the club goods. So, it is also like private goods. However, it is non-rivalrous until congestion, meaning we have an example here of Canva, Wi-Fi, or golf club. So, let us have an example, the golf club. So, in a golf club, everyone who subscribes or who is a member of that club can benefit from going there and playing golf. But the accessibility of going there or the spaces can be overconsumed by the people. So, meaning other people might not get the same benefit that other people are getting since it is overcrowded. So, that is club goods. Just take note that club goods are always subscription based, meaning these types of goods are being paid by people to have an access. So, the simplest examples that I can provide are Spotify, Netflix, or Canva. So these types of goods or apps in our mobile phones are we can benefit from it from subscribing to it, from paying to get the premium, to access better qualities. So these are the type of goods that we buy. And that is basically club goods along with private goods. Now we can draw that it is more likely that public goods and common or pool goods are just the same with each other or they are more alike. But then we have private goods and club goods which we can draw that they are more alike or they have more similarities. And from that, we can conclude that we have different type of economic goods and it is up to us on what type of goods we consume. But let us just be reminded that those types of goods are sometimes can deplete. So we should always think of other people that are also consuming the same type of goods, and then we should be mindful of how we consume the products or the goods that are available in our community.
Since the market on its own fails to allocate resources efficiently or fairly and causes harm along the way, the government steps up and intervenes to correct or reduce these failures. The three main roles of the government in addressing market failure, in simple words, are to regulate, provide, and protect. First is regulate. The government creates and enforces rules to guide economic activities. When the market causes harm, such as pollution or unfair pricing, regulation ensures that businesses follow standards that protect consumers and the environment. Second is to provide. The government supplies goods and services that the market doesn't produce efficiently or fairly, such as public goods like roads, education, or healthcare or national defense. And third is to protect. The government safeguards people and property through laws, security, and social protection programs to ensure safety and fairness in the economy. Again, the market alone cannot allocate resources efficiently or fairly, so the government steps in to prevent harm, restore balance, and promote social welfare. As discussed a while ago, negative externalities occur when an economic activity causes harm to people who are not directly involved in the transaction. One of the most known examples of this is the closure of Boracay in 2018, which explains how the government deals with negative externalities. The government addresses negative externalities by imposing taxes, fines, pollution controls, or even shutdowns, as seen when Boracay was closed for 6 months to stop environmental damage caused by tourism businesses and locals and tourists alike. The government's action to temporarily close Boracay to the public for rehabilitation acted as a corrective policy, forcing businesses or business owners to comply with proper sewage systems and other environmental regulations. It may have hurt businesses temporarily, but it protected the environment in the long run. It is the government that handles public goods, things like streetlights, roads, or national defense that everyone can use without being excluded or paying a cost. To do so, the government collects taxes from the public. It uses these funds to produce and maintain public goods. The government also regulates their use so they are not exploited or wasted. This way, public goods are available to everyone and enjoyed by all people from every walks of life. However, government intervention is not always perfect. Sometimes, attempts to fix market failures cause new problems, known as government failure. In terms of power concentration, or the instance when only one or a few entities control an entire sector, a good example is the Manila Electric Cooperative or Meralco, the dominant electricity distributor in Metro Manila and nearby provinces. These kinds of powerful companies can lobby to the government, making regulations weak or biased on its favor. This is an example of regulatory capture, where the government, who is supposed to be the regulators, end up protecting the interests of big corporations in exchange of big favors. So instead of correcting the failure of the government becomes part of the failure. Lastly, in terms of information asymmetry, the example we provided is the still highly controversial flood control projects. The issue of the DPWH ghost projects clearly shows that funds from the pockets of the Filipino people that were allocated for infrastructure projects did not actually exist or were never completed. Yet officials have spent all the funds and reported it as finished projects. In the government, the citizens entrust public officials to use their taxes responsibly and deliver public goods. However, because officials have better information than the citizens about how funds are used and the public can monitor every project, officials may act in their self-interest instead of serving the public. The issue of the DPWH Ghost project shows that even when government intervenes to provide public goods, failure occurs if oversight and accountability is weak.
I'm Jacob Clifford.
And I'm Adrienne Hill, and welcome to Crash Course Economics.
In the last few videos, we've said a lot of nice things about how competitive markets allocate resources. You know, they do a pretty good job.
But nobody's perfect. Sometimes markets get it wrong. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes the byproducts of production make people sick. Today, we're going to talk about those market failures and how economists address them. In 2015, a story made the rounds online about a University of Maryland professor and an extra credit question. Select whether you want 2 points or 6 points added onto your final paper grade. But there's a small catch. If more than 10% of the class selects 6 points, then no one gets any points. So what would you do? The question alludes to one of the biggest problems with free markets. Sometimes people have a personal incentive to do something that's against the collective interests of the group. Obviously, everyone wants at least some extra credit, but there's also an incentive to get even more points. In this situation, the professor reported that too many people chose 6 points and no one got extra credit. Let's say that your local government sent a similar proposition to every household in your city. Select whether you want to pay $20 or $100 to fund the local fire department. But there's a small catch. If more than 50% of citizens choose $20, there's not going to be enough money to have a fire department. This is the free rider problem. Free riders are people who benefit without paying. They're not necessarily evil. Let's face it, you probably know someone that's illegally downloaded Game of Thrones, but they're responding to incentives. Why pay more if I can get it for less? If too many people think like this, then we're all worse off, and we're going to end up not getting the things we want, like fire protection or a satisfying ending to Game of Thrones. So how do most cities get around the problem that some people will benefit even if they don't pay? The city doesn't ask for money, they demand money in the form of taxes. The reasoning is that fire protection is so essential that people shouldn't be allowed to opt out.
So things that are for our collective well-being, like fire protection, schools, and national defense, are often funded by the government. When markets alone fail to provide enough of these things, that's called market failures. These are often called public goods, but the technical definition of a public good is anything that has two characteristics: non-exclusion and non-rivalry. Non-exclusion is the idea that you can't exclude people that don't pay. For example, it's impossible to limit the benefits of national defense to only people who pay their taxes. People who pay no federal taxes still get the benefit of protection from bombs, and people who pay a lot of federal taxes don't get extra protection. Non-rivalry is the idea that one person's consumption of the good doesn't ruin it for other people. So public parks are a great example. You can use it today, I can use it tomorrow, it can be shared, ideally. If a good or service meets these two criteria, it's unlikely that private firms will produce it, no matter how essential it is. Street lights and organizations that track and prevent the spread of diseases are pretty important, and if the government doesn't step in, we probably won't get them.
The incentive to do what's best for you rather than what's best for everyone is the root cause of something economists call the tragedy of the commons. This is the idea that common goods that everyone has access to are often misused and exploited. It explains the cause of most of our environmental problems, like air pollution, deforestation, the killing of endangered species, and overfishing. In many places in the world, there are more fish being pulled out of rivers, lakes, and oceans than there are fish being born. This isn't just bad for the fish, it's bad for the people doing the fishing. As these resources are depleted, fishermen find themselves without a job. So why aren't they conserving, allowing fish to reproduce and generate more fish resources for the future? Well, look at the incentives. If a few environmentally conscious fishermen decide to give the fish time to spawn, then some other fishermen will harvest them instead. If you can't prevent other people from exploiting the resource, then you have an incentive to exploit it yourself and take as much as you can as quickly as you can. But with everyone following that logic, the finite resource gets pillaged. The tragedy of the commons explains why fish stocks get depleted, why the rainforest gets cut down, and why endangered species get hunted for their hides or horns. There's an entire subfield of economics focused on addressing and solving these issues. It's called environmental economics.
The problem here is that unregulated markets sometimes don't produce the outcome that society wants. Remember, sometimes markets misallocate resources because they don't have the right price signals. There's no better example of this than what economists call externalities. Externalities are situations when there's external costs or external benefits that accrue to other people or society as a whole. When other people are made worse off, that's called a negative externality. When other people are made better off, that's called a positive externality. Let's go to the thought bubble. Let's look at a TV factory that pollutes a river with toxic chemicals. This is definitely a negative externality. The factory has internal costs. It has to pay its workers, buy raw materials, pay for energy, and it uses those costs to determine how many TVs to produce. But there are also external costs associated with polluting the waterways, like dead fish, contaminated drinking water, and people getting sick. Those external costs are paid by people downstream and are likely to be ignored by the factory owner. The free market assumes that all the costs associated with producing TVs are accounted for within the price of those TVs. But in this case, the market is wrong. The end result is a market failure because the factory is producing too many TVs. As for positive externalities, think of education. More education is great for you. You'll likely generate more income, and it makes you a more interesting person to talk to at parties. But there are also external benefits of your education. Everyone's actually made better off. With more education, you're more likely to be a positive and productive member of society. And if you earn a higher income, that means more tax revenue. Now, in both of these cases, negative and positive externalities, economists often look to the government to step in and solve the problem. For example, the government could tax a TV factory or subsidize education. In fact, externalities are the justification for almost everything the government does. When politicians tax cigarettes, fund education, subsidize fuel-efficient cars, or regulate financial markets, it's because they're convinced that the free market alone is not adjusting for externalities.
Thanks, Thought Bubble. We've tried to explain the problem of externalities. Now let's talk about the solutions. When the government tries to fix externalities, it can use regulatory policies or market-based policies. Regulatory policies are simply rules established by government decree. Some people complain about regulation. They say the government can't tell me what to do, but let's be honest, it can. The government also spends a ton of time and money telling you what you can't do. Don't drive too fast, don't build a house in Yellowstone, don't kill anybody. It seems like the government probably should regulate some stuff. The question is, how much should they regulate? Even people who adamantly oppose government regulation probably agree that nuclear weapons and nerve gas shouldn't be on the shelves at Target. Let's go back to the TV factory example. To help solve the pollution externality, the government could ban the use of certain types of chemicals, or set a production quota to limit the production of TVs, or regulate what can be dumped in the river. In the US, the Environmental Protection Agency has pushed for laws to control pollution, and these regulations have worked. Regulation can also create positive externalities. In some cases, the external benefits are perceived to be so high that the government essentially takes over the market. Consider education. Most countries have compulsory education, which requires citizens to be educated up to a specific age, and the government pays for schools through taxes. If the government didn't get involved, all education would be provided by private schools that would charge tuition. There might not be enough affordable schools to educate young people. The government funds education because they think that the external benefits, like literate, well-informed, erudite citizens, are so high it's worth forcing everyone to pay.
Another way that governments try to solve externalities is with market-based policies. These are policies designed to manipulate markets, prices, and incentives to correct for market failures. The best examples are taxes and subsidies. A tax on the production of TVs or on the chemicals the factory is using will decrease production and limit pollution. Federal grants that help subsidize college education will increase the amount of education people buy. In general, economists tend to prefer market-based policies. Take cigarettes. Cigarettes generate high external costs on society. There's secondhand smoke, and there's higher healthcare costs for everyone due to smoking-related illnesses. The government could force cigarette companies to produce less or just shut them down entirely, but instead they tax cigarettes. The tax drives up the price, consumers buy fewer cigarettes, and this addresses the negative externality. Now, this market-based approach has one key advantage over the regulatory approach. Instead of spending money on enforcing regulations, the government is earning tax revenue that can be used for different purposes. In real life, though, governments often use both policies. In the US, the government taxes cigarette producers and regulates where people can smoke. It also restricts how tobacco companies can advertise and supports anti-smoking campaigns designed to convince people to quit smoking. Seriously, you should stop smoking. Market-based approaches to reduce negative externalities are also used to fight climate change. Many economists argue that taxes on carbon-based fuels like coal, oil, and gas are a more effective way to deal with air pollution.
One oft-discussed market-based policy is emissions trading, or cap and trade. The government issues pollution permits, and if your factory doesn't hold one of those permits, it can't pollute. But companies can buy or sell those permits. This sets up incentives to go green. If you can produce without pollution, you can make money by selling your permits. But if you operate a dirty plant, you have to pay for those extra permits. As controversial as cap and trade can be among American politicians, it's interesting to note that it's already been used successfully in the U.S. A cap and trade program to reduce acid rain pollution, it worked. It cut sulfur dioxide emissions. According to a 2003 report from the Office of Management and Budget, the acid rain program accounted for the largest quantified human health benefits of any major federal regulatory program implemented in the last 10 years, with benefits exceeding costs by more than 40 to 1. Remember that extra credit question? What if the world's largest economies were given a similar proposition? Select whether you want to decrease your pollution by 5% or 30%, with a small catch. If more than 50% of countries choose only 5%, then climate change will make Earth unlivable. That simplifies the issue, but it does illustrate why it's so hard to address climate change. Individual countries might work to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, but they can't prevent other countries from polluting. It's the tragedy of the commons. In an unregulated global economy where producers want to make products as cheaply as possible, there's an incentive to ignore the environment to get ahead. Global issues like climate change, human rights abuses, and nuclear proliferation can't be effectively addressed if countries don't work together. But that requires a lot of trust and a lot of commitment.
So markets aren't perfect. There are many cases when the government should get involved, and there's even some cases when the government should just take control.
The question isn't which is better, free markets or government. The question is how can they work together to make our lives better? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Crash Course Economics is made with the help of all these fine people. You can support Crash Course at Patreon, a voluntary subscription service where your support helps keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, and you get great rewards. Thanks for watching, and DFTBA.
Thank you for listening.